I could have everybody's attention, I would like to call the August 11th, 2016 Board of Education work session to order. If we could all rise for invocation and pledge. Dr. Bearden.
Good afternoon, everybody. Please join me for a moment of silent reflection, please. Thank you. Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have before us an agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. A motion by Tom and a second by Nancy. All in favor? Unanimous. And first on that agenda is the presentation and discussion items. Policy JEAC, System Use of Purchase Cards or Credit Cards, with Mr. Rick Gunn.
Good afternoon.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Well, we have a new board policy that we have to adopt related to purchasing cards or credit cards that the district may be using. What we've done is we've gone through several other systems, policies and procedures, and we took the best parts of those policies, came up with our own, and that's what I have for you today. Just so you know, each of our schools has the opportunity to have a BB&T credit card that is linked to their bank account. Right now, the majority of our schools do have that card, and the only cards that we have in the district from BB&T is a board credit card that Dr. Bearden has, and then the principals with their cards. There's no other credit cards from BB&T in the district. Those cards had a limit of between $800 and $1,500, and we'll talk about that in a moment in regards to those cards. Basically, what the policy does is it establishes some guidelines for the users of those cards. Right now, we've done an inventory of what's out in the schools other than the BB&T cards. What we found is the majority of them, not the majority of them, several of them have cards to Publix or to Kroger that they use for their culinary arts programs. And coupled with this, we were trying to get a handle on what all is out there. There's a couple of schools with Home Depot or Lowe's, but there's nothing extreme. There's not these cards that we've never heard of out there. Basically, with the policy, the users of the cards will have to sign an agreement, which will basically, and I'll show that to you in a moment, but basically it says that I'm aware that I have one card, BB&T, and if I have any other cards, I've let the Chief Financial Officer know those by list, and I have approved those cards. Basic uses for the cards are office supplies, classroom supplies, course books, publications. As you know, today in the electronic world, many things have to be done by credit card online. Amazon.com, for instance, is one of the sites, and the schools are finding more and more and more that they need to be able to do that. The limit on the cards, as I said, have been $1,500. What we're looking at doing is raising those limits to $2,500 for elementaries and $5,000 for high schools. What our internal auditor has found, and what some of the principals have told me, is they run up to the $1,500, make a quick payment, run it up to the $1,500, make a quick payment. And along with this, they're having to do all the due diligence, the documentation that they would have to do for a normal check. So rather than just writing a check to Walmart, they're able to use the card to Walmart, and they have the same documentation that they would as if they had written a check to Walmart. And they have to pre-approve all of that with the principal before they do it. So that's the reason for raising the amounts. We found that at elementary schools, the majority of them write around 50 checks a month, so they don't need as many transactions as a high school does, so that's why we have those two different amounts. Items that they're prohibited from doing, of course, travel expenses. All travel has to come through our office because I have to do a report to the state each year on salaries and travel. No personal purchases, no cash advances, no alcoholic beverages.
Can I just clarify?
Yes, ma'am.
So it says the transaction limit for elementary, for example, is $2,500. So do you mean the running balance or the actual?
The running balance.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. The running balance. It's not per transaction, and I'll change that language in it to where it doesn't read that way, because I was reading over it a second ago, and I said, well, does it, the way it's written out, it kind of, right. So I can change that. It's going to be $2,500 limit per card for elementary and $5,000 for middle and high. Item 7 has some do's and don'ts that are your normal items. And basically item 8 saying that they understand that this is a privilege to use the card. Now, outside of the policy, we have an agreement that the principal would sign that is, they were declaring that this is the only card they have, unless there's a list of cards that I've signed off on with that principal. So right now, we only have a handful of other cards, as I said, Publix or Kroger, and we'll look at those individually to determine which ones will allow them to keep and to not have anymore. So, but we were happy with what we found out there. It's not as many as I thought there might be, which is a good sign. And in raising the limit, we're also hoping to we'll be getting rid of some of the other cards that are out there.
Mm-hmm. So if they have another card like at Kroger or Home Depot, would there be some kind of limit for that separately?
Yes, yes, we'll look at those individually, and that's where I would have an attachment with it, with the cards that we would be allowing them to keep. But that's what we've done an audit system-wide, and what they, under the honor system, what they've reported to me so far has been the bulk of them have been Publix cards, and that's mostly for the culinary arts or for the various needs that they use for
So they
day-to-day
won't have
operations.
those anymore?
No, they can still have those.
They can still have those?
That's what we're taking under consideration right now is we're looking at district-wide what's there, and then we'll make a decision as to which ones will be allowed to have, in addition to the BB&T card.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure it would be really inconvenient for the culinary people.
Right. Okay, any questions on the policy? Okay, I think you have to have it for 30 days,
Right.
is it? Okay.
Vote on it on the next one.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have policy IDCH revision, dual enrollment, enrollment move on when ready with Dr. Valerie Lowe.
We need to do some minor adjustments to policy revisions based on changes that you all know have happened over the past couple of years with Move On When Ready. The main emphasis behind the change is we are being advised, as most school systems are, to reflect back to state board rules, so not have our own policy, but really our policy should mirror the state board rules. So this law just states that any high school student, 9 through 12, are able to participate in dual credit courses, and it gives you the breakdown of how the conversion happens, and we also do quality points. The difference in this, as we've discussed, are sometimes we do have undocumented students who wanted to participate in dual enrollment, and now that is not a barrier either. Before, in the past, that was a barrier for them being able to participate with the HOPE Scholarship and HOPE Grant funds. And the way that they've shifted the funds over to the Georgia Student Finance Commission, that's no longer a barrier. So any student, any high school student can now participate in dual enrollment. To be able to participate, they obviously have to meet entrance requirements of any post-secondary institution that they're looking to attend. And if they choose to truly move on when ready and move on typically after the 10th grade, they have to make sure that they have passed the 8 ERC courses in their freshman and sophomore year and have taken the end-of-course test there, and also their health and PE. If they do that and do one of the following at the bottom, either an associate's degree, a diploma, or 2 TCCs at a technical college, then their high school graduation is then retroactive. So there's really 2 different scenarios. We have students who just take 1 or 2 classes a year, maybe their junior or senior year, but they're still actively on campus. But we may have some other students who would like to forego maybe their junior or senior year of high school and truly be on campus full-time at a college or university. And as long as they do one of the following, then we don't have to go back and really have a credit-for-credit explanation of the students ensuring their high school credits on our side. So hopefully that makes sense to you all on that end. Just a little bit of an update of where we were at for 15-16. We are still enrolling students currently for this upcoming school year, so we don't have those tallies, the schools won't start probably till another week and a half with most of our college students, but this just shows enrollment. And if we pull where we were several years ago, it's very much doubling or tripling year by year by year because of all the changes that have happened over the past couple of years. We still have instances of issues where we're not able to counsel students, especially those students who are off campus. It's very hard with our research universities to get information about how they're doing and tracking their progress because they're still our student. So that's one challenge that we face. We do a good job here locally with the University of North Georgia, the Cumming campus, as well as Linear Tech, for them to be able to let us know the progress of our students. So if there is an issue with grades or attendance, that kind of thing, it funnels through our office, and we make contact with the counselors to let them know the issues. So we've got a pretty good support system in place for this to be a very safe location and experience for our students, but we did need to make these minor changes. So we're going to recommend that we rescind and revise based on state board rule, and we will again put this out again for public review and have it on the September 15th board meeting.
Valerie, other than North Georgia and Linear Tech, what other schools are Tech in Georgia, any of those?
We have students just about at any institution. As you all know, especially even Valdosta, Georgia Southern, they're doing a lot online. So we've got instances of that. Georgia Tech, we've got a lot of students at Georgia Tech, not as many at UGA, but they're really, truly, Georgia State, is down in Alpharetta, so they're, we don't really, they have the ability to go wherever they choose in the state of Georgia. And as long as there is a cross-check for us to be able to sign off to say that it is a course that is something they need to graduate and it is on an approved list that the state provides, then they can go where they want to. But that does make it a challenge on our side and for our counselors because, they are still our student. A lot of times FERPA regulations don't allow parents to be able to access a lot of that information. We still can because it's through dual enrollment, but even a parent getting involved at that level is hard. So there are challenges. There's pros and cons to all these changes in state law. It's great for a lot of kids and a lot of families, but it does require a lot of attention one-on-one with a student to kind of make sure that they're on track because we want them to be successful. But again, it depends on the institution that we're working with.
I have a friend who has a son who's a senior at Central, and he is taking calculus at Tech. Is that part of this program?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Anybody? I don't think so. Thank you. Oh, you're next, too. CTAE College and Career Development Update.
We wanted to give you an update not only on where we're at with Alliance Academy, but just generally where we are as a department. We've had a lot of changes over the past several months in terms of what we're doing and our direction and focus with some added emphasis. But as you guys know, we coordinate all of the career and technical education for the school district. We do dual enrollment, move on when ready, and anything dealing with post-secondary transition. So our mission is to provide these partnerships and sustainability in place so that students are prepared and kind of have a better idea of where they're headed next. So we started working this summer with our career development coordinators, and Deborah Moore, Ann Williams, and Emily Henderson are all here today. They have been busy working, and we've kind of redefined really who we are and where we're headed as a department. You all know we used to say workforce development on what we did, and we had a conversation with lots of folks on that, really probably needing to change based on our student population and who we're serving. So we are now college and career development. So that really takes into account both options for students and where they're headed. So we worked a lot on that. With that came lots of rebranding, working on a new website, all of our pieces. So we've been busy doing that to this very moment. So we're busy with that. We're also busy with, you all know, construction and renovations to our labs. We've got about 15 CTAE labs right now that have had some type of major construction over the past year. So we're working this year on capital equipment money, almost $1 million worth of capital outlay to help support and go back into those classrooms with expendable equipment. So we're working on that right now. Our graduation rate, which this was picked up locally, it came out from the department that a student enrolled or at least concentrating in a career pathway has a greater statewide graduation rate. In our case, in Forsyth County, the graduation rate is around 98%. So a student that concentrates at least one or more CTAE courses, if you take those students and run their graduation rate, it's around 98%. And our industry certification pass rate is about 84%. And while you may look at that and think that that's lower than where we are normally in the 90s with anything that we have, That's an industry credential test that you or I may take to gain employment through Adobe, through SolidWorks, through Microsoft Office. So these are very, very difficult tests, and while we don't have a statewide comparison because they don't release that data, if you ever are curious about what our students are doing in the tests that they're taking, you know, it may be a CNA, it may be a phlebotomy technician. These are tests that adults in the workforce are taking. So that is a very high pass rate for the industry certification test for a high schooler. This gives you an idea of the leadership in the district working on CTAE. Again, Emily, Deborah, and Ann are here today, and they have transitioned full-time to career development. And then we also listed our school CTAE administrators and our department heads. I'm happy that all 5 of our school administrators are also going through the Department of Education's program that they have for school leaders, just focusing on CTAE, so they'll be doing that this school year as well. So I was thankful for them to be able to do that because there is so much involved, and it really helps for them to network with their peers around the state as well. And then our department heads are listed. In terms of what Emily and Ann and Deborah are doing, this just kind of gives you an exhaustive list of, you know, what are career development coordinators. So they're handling work-based learning, you know, honors mentorship. They're supporting each an element of pathway or for advisory councils and just that particular guidance in those areas. Certainly the business engagement and alignment, development of our career path partners, which I'll talk about in a second. Overall data analysis with CTAE and what we have to look at. End of pathways, dressing for success days that we have at our high schools, job shadowing programs, middle to high school transitions, and community mock interview weeks. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what their scope is each and every day. Right now they're really busy on this side of the house working on getting our students up and gainfully employed that are in work-based learning or honors mentorship. And just so you know, you may get questions in the community about the differences in the program. Work-based learning is more of a paid or unpaid internship. So a student kind of has a set schedule a week. They work a certain number of hours. The honors mentorship was developed out of our need to have a career-related capstone project for the district. So we developed this program with help from a couple of other school systems who were doing this already. And really this is a job shadowing experience. So a kid might not want a typical 9 to 5, if you will, job, but they want to spend a couple hours a month in the community shadowing someone. It doesn't mean that the employer is necessarily hiring them or ramping them up to employment, but it means that they're willing to spend several hours a week or a month with a student learning about, and that culminates throughout the year through career-related research that they're doing on their own, and at the end of the year they have a community night where all the mentorship students will present their presentation. So that's the difference mainly between the programs. Again, mentorship doesn't necessarily have to be tied to their pathway. We may have a student at a particular school that really wants to be a physician. They've kind of geared towards science in high school. They can still be an honors mentorship versus them not having a healthcare background in high school. So hopefully that makes sense between the two.
So that's like the HOSA students were going over the hospital and shadowing the doctor, is that
They're actually, yes, it's more of an internship, but it's tied back to their pathway. So that's really what we try to do with work-based learning, whether it's paid or unpaid. It has to be tied to what they're doing at the school. That's just the extension of their pathway. An honors mentorship could be an art student or a band student who wants to, you know, they've not had the time to take a pathway, but yet they want to do some in-depth career-related research. So honors mentorship is very new, so we're just now ramping up on it, and Deborah Moore and Central's got several students involved in this, as well as South and a few of the others, so it's brand new. The Georgia Best training that we do on soft skills and business ethics, this gives you an idea of what our third-year students are studying all throughout the year. Several students take advantage of a couple of events that we do each year. We do one here at the collections in Forsyth with scenario-based ethics in different types of businesses, and then we also take students up to UNG and Dahlonega, and they do scenarios up there as well, and then have a tour of the campus. So we partner with Junior Achievement and UNG for this particular program. I gave you the dates for the community mock interview weeks. Hopefully you can get to one of those in the next year. We typically do those in the spring after they've done all the other things for Georgia Best. And then we have a a lady who is nationally recognized in business etiquette and just overall general etiquette in the workplace. She will be coming in the spring to each high school several weeks before their actual interviews to work with them on kind of building their brand and preparing them for the interviews. So that we did something similar last year, which seemed to help the students prepare for their particular day. We also had last year an application developed where our interviewers are able to provide feedback electronically while the student's with them, and then it's a pretty neat system where we can get everything back to the teachers in PDFs with their comments and feedback and follow up for the interviewers. So that worked really well last year, so we'll do that again. We are monitored every 5 years for Perkins compliance, as we are with similar other initiatives in the district, but our scheduled compliance review is supposed to be in 17-18, which is good. It'll give us this year to get construction settled down and everything back together where it should be and in its place. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of indicator data that we as CTAE have to make sure that we're monitoring and implementing into our instruction. And one particular piece that we worked on, Darlene Alberson and I worked on last year, was just the whole inventory system and how we track all this equipment and anything down to a knife or a spoon in a culinary classroom, where it's at, what room, especially now with all the construction, things got shifted and moved, and it's just, we're really working hard to make sure that everything is on track by the time we have our next review. So that's been a big chore. This you've seen before, but I just included it again for those that had not. This is kind of our framework for how our teachers work in terms of career tech. This gives you a little bit more background on how we do professional development and advisory council planning. They meet with me, each group of teachers by cluster once a semester. Part of that day is spent there with their advisory council. They have a 1-hour advisory council meeting with business and industry at any point during the day, and the rest of the day is spent with myself and other folks working with them on professional development, CTSO planning, dates, etc. And then we try to give them always a focus at the beginning of the year on how to really ramp up what they're doing in the classroom around business and industry involvement. So Emily Henderson and a lot of the coordinators helped kind of revamp our advisory council handbook over the summer. And then we gave our teachers at the beginning of the year some charge from us to encourage them to remember what they're doing and how to better connect that. So our career development coordinators are helping them in the classroom with that. So I listed those there. Our Career Path Partners is probably our newest endeavor. We're just working on that. I put a bunch of links on eBoard for you to hopefully take time to look through a lot of this, but we decided we needed to really formalize businesses that were working with us rather than, we had our advisory councils, but we never really formalized what their role should be. So I included a link there for you to see a document that they're going to be using along with us. It basically just says that they'll help promote our programs. They'll work with us so many times a year. They let us know what areas they can help us in, and we've listed those there. So we wanted to make it more official with social media and other things to publicize who's working with our programs and how. And so that document's there, and we're also working on a portal that's going to help us manage exactly when they were there and how they were there, because it's hard for me to track and know what's going on at every school and who's in what classroom, but it's really powerful data for us to track. So we're developing a portal for the volunteer to use as well as for us to use to monitor that. I included links to resources for our 16-17 career planner as well as our teacher handbook that we've developed. We're working on getting printed copies of those because I know that would be handy for you all to have when you're out and about. So we are working on getting those printed now, but that just defines what's where and what we offer. So hopefully you've had time or we'll have time to look at that. Shifting gears a little bit to Alliance, we wanted to provide you an update of where we were with this project. Just provided some overview for those who weren't familiar with the project, and we're again on track hopefully to open by 18-19. Our potential list of career pathways has not changed since we last updated you. And really our ongoing efforts are around finalizing the land purchase. We've already finished the bond, as you all know. We will provide the capital outlay application for you tonight to approve. Curriculum development is ongoing. Equipment research, cost estimates, those are ongoing. Our marketing plan of how to outreach to parents and students, because really this is going to start pretty quick. And our main focus really right now is ramping up with for next generation learning to kind of start phase 1 into phase 2 to really see where we're headed. Junior Achievement, we met with them yesterday to start working on our capital campaign for major donors for that project. And then the Technical College System of Georgia grant release. We've looked at the grant that has been released. As you all know, we went down that road last year, and we're still really not confident of the language of how the certification process is written. So a lot of us have looked at it. Mr. Hartley has looked at it, and Dr. Bearden may have more to add to that. But really, we're going to kind of wait and see how that happens. The law did change, so we're able to easily apply, but yet the language in the certification process really doesn't reflect the changes in law yet. So we're not really sure if that's really going to be a road we're going to go down this year.
Yeah, Valerie, let me just add, at that point, we did have an extensive conversation with Mr. Hartley, our attorney, and the question came up, since the school is not going to open till the 2018-2019 school year, why apply now? Because the language is very fluid. It's been changing. We're not sure it will not change again by next year. As Valerie pointed out, the way it's currently written, based on our previous conversations, I know this board would not be comfortable with the language as written in terms of governance. It's better than it was, but it's still not where this board would want it to be. And so we just decided we're just going to take a wait-and-see approach, see if the language evolves, and if next year we feel comfortable that the language aligns with this board's philosophy in terms of governance, we can pursue it at that time. And if it doesn't, we probably will just not pursue the opportunity. Because you guys made it very clear as we talked about what your expectations were in terms of governance. And again, it has evolved and it's better, but it's still, and if Mr. Hartley was here tonight, he would probably advise you, it's not where you want it to be yet. And so we're just going to take a time out and we'll see where it is next year.
Are you able to give feedback that you wish it would go in this direction?
And that was part of, I was waiting till tonight for you all to give me the blessing to do that, because on the forward and for the grant, because I really do want to, because they obviously value and want us a part of this. So I wanted to talk to you all first about it tonight and let you know that we had some reservations about it. And then if you were all comfortable, then in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to set something up to talk to the Technical College System of Georgia. I have talked to Dr. Wall at the State Department about our issues. She agrees and has the same opinion. I've talked to 4 or 5 other school districts who may be replicating a school such as this. They went down that road the first time. They're not going down that road the second time. So I think the conversation is ongoing, but I think we could have some influence with that, just like we did with the changes in law. So if you all were comfortable with that, then we were going to let them know of our intent probably to not apply this year, but we would like to sit down to talk about why and our reservations with the process.
Yeah, the term autonomy continues to surface in the language, which I'm not comfortable with, and I know you're not comfortable with yet. And also some of the training requirements that are far different than what we do with our current local school councils, which could lead to some confusion for people on that board when they start attending some of these training sessions. And the talk is, well, these boards and other college and career academies are doing these things, but our board is basically acting like a local school council. And so those are our immediate concerns as we address them. And again, I was pretty confident that you would agree. And yes, we will give feedback because if they would change it to align with what we want, we would certainly want to consider that. But we're not there right now.
It would be a Forsyth, it's part of our Forsyth County school system. It's not part of the state. It's kind of a turf thing, is it not?
It is.
Is that the $3 million that we try
It
to
is, and there's a big push going on for CTAE, the division, to fall under the technical college system rather than the Department of Education, which we are not in favor of.
No.
But with that comes 100% control, really, of Perkins funding. So I think there is some things going on otherwise that, maybe this makes sense for them to get, a little bit more involvement into the DOE side. So I think that may be the background behind it. But again, the change in law versus the change in what we saw with the certification process don't really align.
Right.
And we feel like that it would, not be within our contract of how we operate our schools to move forward.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Valerie, but the one change that was fairly significant is it no longer has to be a charter school.
Right.
That was part of it before, so now it can fall under your strategic waiver contract. So that was a move in a positive direction, but still, in our opinion, and Mr. Hartley's opinion, it didn't quite go as far as what this board wants to
Right,
do.
as you've always said, and we say we're a system of schools, we're not a school system,
That's
so
right.
that for it to be separate from what we're trying to do as a whole would not be good for anybody.
Right.
And
We just tried to make a real educated decision and put a lot of background and talking with a lot of folks across the state, and we're just not comfortable with it, and hopefully they're going to listen to us. But again, $3 million, while that is very much an incentive with this type of school that we're building, it's going to have a lesser impact for us than it may for other school systems.
you briefly mentioned about the Forward Next Generation Learning. What is the difference in language? Is that a program that we can easily absorb, or is that something that also needs to be looked at as far as?
No, it is, and it's completely separate from what the technical
state.
college system are doing. A lot of people are using those funds to kind of ramp up with some of this if they need to, but it's completely separate. So the tenets for that, again, I know you've seen this before, but there's 5 phases that we would go through as a school district over probably a 2 or 3 year period, but basically this just takes a different approach to teaching, a different approach to the work-based site, to the community investment. And a lot of the things that you're seeing that we're already implementing are things that we've already learned from that, either from Tennessee or from Florida that we've seen. So we're already starting to work towards this direction, but it just provides a really strong support system to really align the academies really themed with that academic component, which is where we want to go probably long-term with most all of our schools, but this is completely separate from the technical college system grant. So that's the roadmap I included, and then I included some renderings, and this slide didn't come out real well, but it just shows the first, second, and third floor of Alliance, of where we're at with the architectural phase. So you can pull those up when you have time. This is a rendering that Junior Achievement took a first stab at kind of our earmarked space for the Discovery Center to show, what this could look like in terms of our storefronts. I know you've all had a chance now to see this, so this gives you a little bit more of an idea of what they would do there in terms of, where the middle school students would be dropped off and what it might look like. So this was version 1 of them sending something to our architects to really know where, electrical and power and things like that were going to be needed. And then they also sent us some updated renderings, just so I think it helps to kind of see what the building looks like right now. So these are just some renderings of that.
It does.
It's like the front of the winter, doesn't it?
And, this is the media center.
More personnel.
This shows the kind of the roll-up doors at the end of some of these career tech labs. Aviation, distribution, mechatronics, the metals area, makerspace. So that just gives you an idea of how the side entry would be. On the left is the STEM gym, so it's got good access to what we'd be doing there in the gym. So wanted to show you all that. And then this is an example of the courtroom, the legal area where we're going to build that into the classroom. So this shows the courtroom, and we were able to go work with the courthouse and the county, their architects and their folks to kind of see what works well for them and what doesn't. So that's where that layout came from. And then this is the cafeteria. So again, a more modern look to more of a food court for the cafeteria. So that's it.
Great.
Question on the Discovery Center. I was happy to see something I was reading, I guess, that we were looking at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade versus when we were they were specifically 6th and 8th. Is that just because they have so many kids, or what was their reason for not 7th?
Well, we'll eventually choose 7th or 8th grade, but what we said this year was that we would allow 7th and 8th graders should the middle school principals decide they want to pilot at 7th and 8th and see how it goes. Eventually, we may bring what we're earmarking 6th grade down to 5th grade, so that 5th and 8th, that kind of can be their culminating event. Florida used 5th grade. Everywhere else we've seen use the 6th grade. So it's going to be up to us, and so that's what we're going to use this year to kind of pilot that with some of our teachers and find out what's going to work best for us. Any other questions?
Well, our role will be to cover the whole north
Quadrant of the other than Gwinnett County will cover this area of the state?
We're working on that now. Really the cap is 15,000 middle school students a year. And so we've taken Northeast Georgia and we've taken some school districts that we've identified we want to work with. And we actually worked on that a little bit more yesterday of refining that, because if you take Forsyth, Hall, Dawson, Lumpkin, you're about there, including Gainesville City. So we're really trying to refine that list, and I'm going to work with Dr. Bearden to invite those superintendents over to Gwinnett or Atlanta to see that, and then we'll do something officially with an MOU with them to be able to use the facility. But in terms of our growth that we're expected, that's going to eliminate serving all of Northeast Georgia. Because we're growing at such a rapid rate. So we're trying to take that into context when we're planning and offering and inviting areas to come partner with us. We've got areas as far away as Dalton that want to participate, but we're really not sure right now if we're going to be able to. So we're working on those numbers actually yesterday.
Wow.
Place to be.
That's a shame.
Anything else?
Anything else? Thank
Thanks.
you. Okay, Georgia's dual language immersion model with Dr. J.B. Rife. How are you? Good.
We're not going to let you leave.
I had to get this in before I went to Denver. Let's see.
We hate to see you go.
I'm sad to leave, and I just want to say how much I've appreciated the opportunity to serve Forsyth for 13 years. This has been a very hard decision, but and I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you today about kind of the background and the research we've done so far on world languages implementation, and then specifically about dual language immersion. I wanted to start, because I think it's appropriate, with the learner profile, and just talk to you about how this initiative directly relates to our learner profile and supports that. 22% of our traits are directly related to the standards that we teach in world languages. So this is a huge part of what we're trying to do in our learner profile. With elementary programs, which I know that we've been kind of looking at as a district, there are 4 main types. The first is dual language immersion, which I'll be talking about a little bit more in depth in a minute. Then there is FLES, which is the foreign language in elementary school, and that's kind of what we had previously if you were in the district before, a FLES program. And then there's FLEX, which is more kind of an exploratory program. And then you have something like extracurricular programs, which are before and after school. The FLEX program really gives you very limited exposure to one or more languages, and it's just kind of a way to get kids excited about exploring a language. It's not really for language acquisition purposes. And the same thing with extracurricular. I wanted to talk, because we need to wrap this kind of around a framework for where we are, and these are the ACTFL proficiency levels, and this governs foreign language and kind of what we expect our learners to be able to do at each level. And if you go up, starting at novice, those are kids that can communicate very short memorized phrases like days of the week, my name is, I'm from. Intermediate, that's when you start to be able to talk about yourself, maybe about your school, what you look like, physical characteristics, things like that. When you get to advanced, they start to be able to handle social situations and autobiographical topics, talk about their community or national topics, like maybe they'd be able to talk about the elections right now, would be an example of that. Superior is when you can start to communicate with accuracy and fluency. That's where a lot of our non-English or non-native speaking teachers are at that superior level. You get, and then distinguished is really where you can do abstract thought. And those are where your court interpreters and things like that, really high advanced technical language comes from. Our current program, so that we can kind of understand what we're doing right now, is this. So level 1, you get kind of that novice low to mid. And so they can, again, they can do things like repeat memorized phrases, things like that. Level 2, you get a little bit further up to novice, mid to high. Level 3, you're still kind of in that novice range, and into intermediate low, and then you move up. By the time they get to level 6 or AP, they're in intermediate high to advanced low, which again is where they can kind of talk about some international, national topics. With dual language immersion, and remember that's level 6 when a high school senior, they're leaving at advanced low. With dual language immersion, you have 5th graders leaving 5th grade at the same level as AP. And it is also staffing neutral, meaning that there's no additional staffing cost for this. the only cost that's related to it is the cost of materials. So what you have are, again, kids leaving 5th grade the same level they would be as an AP student that is currently exiting our program. So I want to talk about FLES a little bit, which is what we had before. And we, Rebecca Johnson, as you probably know, did a lot of research last year and looked at kind of different costs and what it would take to implement some of these programs. So what we came up with is that 3 segments for 90 minutes per week. You would have kids leaving 7th grade at an intermediate or novice high to intermediate low. And what that would mean is they could say things like, my name is, they can do colors, days of the week, but to use the language appropriately, they wouldn't really be able to do yet. And I taught high school when we had this program before. And so these kids were coming to me as level 1 or level 2 students, and I will tell you, there was not a huge measurable difference between the students that had had foreign language all the way through and the kids who hadn't. They could do some basic things like tell me basic information. They had a really great grasp on the days of the week because they could all sing the song, but they couldn't carry on a conversation. And if you have children that have been through that, you probably have been out, you know, and you hear someone speaking Spanish and you'll be like, well, what'd they say? And they say, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's because, again, with this FLES program, that really is only the level that they're going to reach with that. And so if we were to implement that in K-7, we're looking at approximately $6.8 million plus the cost of materials. And then if we just did it in 4-7, we're looking at $3.48 million plus, or 8.5 plus the cost of materials. Again, and that's to get a very low level of language proficiency.
And that's just the cost of salaries and things like
That
that?
is just salaries.
Where are we going to put them?
Correct. That is correct. So then if you look at FLEX, that is really, sometimes you'll have, you know, exposure to different languages for students. There's really no language proficiency developed or cultural proficiency. That's just really to get kids excited maybe about pursuing it in later grades. And the issue with that is we know that the younger you start world languages, the much faster and easier you learn it. I got the opportunity to go visit a pre-K that's a full immersion pre-K, and to hear those kids speak and the accent that they have and the way that they can communicate already at age 4 is absolutely phenomenal. And it's because at that age the language acquisition is so incredibly high. The other kind of model is extracurricular, and we have had some schools in the county that have attempted this. And Rebecca, in this data gathering process, surveyed principals, and all 3 schools that had attempted this model discontinued it because of low enrollment, and they stated that it was not effective in delivering any sort of meaningful instruction. And also there's not support really in research to say that this would be a model that would really get us towards what we're doing with the learner profile. So basically, in 15-16, we did a lot of research, and we came up with that FLEX, FLES, and extracurricular tend to be costly, and they have very little measurable effect on language acquisition. And that immersion really is the only true manner in which we develop that second language competency. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about my own journey because I am exactly what we're trying to do, which is have a non-native speaker reach that level of proficiency, and I'll talk a little bit about that. This is from the DOE. The Department of Education has really made a big push to have dual language immersion, and I'll talk in a moment about what that looks like, just to answer your questions. But these are some of the really enhanced benefits of dual language. Second language skills, obviously the earlier you learn, the more that you're immersed in it, the better your skills are. Cognitively, developing a second language has some very significant cognitive benefits. I'll show you performance on standardized tests and how it increases that. Intercultural competency, which is a big part of our learner profile, long-term benefits, being prepared for a global economy and community, and then higher attendance rate also for students. This is some research that has been done on DLI, and this is overall student academic achievement. The red is students who have been in DLI, and again, this is just your general education students' reading scores. Here is ESOL achievement, and this is one of the places where we could really close, I think, the achievement gap for some of our students. Dual language immersion recently became an approved delivery model of ESOL instruction in the state of Georgia, which is huge because it really, if you have a student who is coming to school in their native language and we are stifling that, it actually stunts their cognitive development. And so by helping them develop their first language, it helps them cognitively. And one of the things that I saw as a high school teacher is when I had native speakers, oftentimes they could speak the language, but their writing really needed work, and it was because they'd never had to write in their native language, so they didn't have the opportunity to develop that skill. So as you can see here, ESOL students in dual language tend to achieve much higher. And then here is Low-SES data, which again is another place that we could really close the achievement gap with a dual language program. How it works. Let me know if this gets a little bit bulky and you have questions, okay? Because it gets a little confusing. Okay, you basically, and I'm going to explain to you how it's staffing neutral. You start in kindergarten at a school, and you still have 2 teachers. One of them is the heritage speaking teacher, and then one of them is your English ESOL teacher. They each have the same 20 students. The heritage speaker teaches this group of kids, which is a mix of heritage speakers and English speaking students, for half the day. And the English speaker does the same thing. And then they switch classes. So they're teaching the same amount of students, just they get Spanish instruction in the morning or afternoon and English in the morning or afternoon. Does that make sense? So it's the same amount of teachers, same amount of students, it's just that they're receiving some of the content standards in the target language.
So they teach different content then?
They do. So like you may have your math and science content in, say, Spanish, and your social studies in ELA in English.
And would that stay the same? You would always have math and science?
It
or
depends.
Do you switch this?
It depends. As they get older, and that's the thing, this is really a K-12 initiative, as they get older, that may change. And I've spoken to several other districts, like Hall County, you know, they have the World Language Academy, and so they're kind of quite a few years ahead of us, and so they've done some different models. The good news is there are so many other districts out there that are doing this that we have a lot to learn from them and kind of where they're headed and what they have found works best. And on the, there's another PowerPoint that I included. That's directly from the DOE, and that gives you a schedule of what a child's day would look like in dual language immersion. Okay, so you would start in kindergarten, and those kids would roll up to first grade after that first year. And then you would start another cohort in kindergarten. So you'd go from 40 to 80 the second year, and then you'd roll up again. And this kind of rolls up every year until you hit 5th grade. And then at middle school, there's a lot of different things we could do to kind of make sure that those students have the opportunity to keep the language acquisition. And then every year, you would just replace 2 teachers with DLI teachers, dual language immersion. We have a lot of staff in the county already that would be capable of doing this because they are heritage speakers, they know the content. So it wouldn't be as if we were just replacing all the time. We have some internal capacity to do that. This is kind of a timeline of what we've done so far. Rebecca and I worked a lot last year on kind of how this looks as a world language and how this works as an ESOL delivery model. And then we met at the end of last year, and I believe they came and presented to you, the parents of the Spanish Academy, about the immersion pre-K program. This year, what I would suggest, if we were going to look at something like this, is for us to get district support and then go out and visit some other dual language immersion programs. I had the opportunity to go to Atlanta Public Schools. It was absolutely amazing. Not only was it amazing to hear the students' language, but it was amazing to watch them interact with each other and how they were just so accepting and just how they wove seamlessly in and out of language with each other.
Was it just at a school, Jamie, or was it academy?
No, it was at a school, so it was a strand within a school.
Okay.
And then you'd also want to spend this year gaining a lot of community input as far as language and where it would go, and that's something that the DOE really feels strongly about, is making sure that you collect community input. And then probably build some initial relationships with organizations such as colleges. They are looking at having an endorsement for dual language immersion. So we would have to look for teachers that kind of have that skill set. And then review materials. And then you'd also want to be looking at which cluster you'd want to put this at. Because like I said, this isn't just a K-5 initiative. Because if you have kids leaving 5th grade at an AP level, they can't go into 6th grade where they don't have world languages. So we'd have to look at where to put that. And then in high school, the recommendation from the Department of Education is that they go into make an IB program. So that's another consideration. During the 17-18 school year,
Wouldn't it be hard if they have to go into, or should go into an IB program? Wouldn't that be limiting?
It would be limiting, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Suggested timeline, again, for 17-18 is they say that you should identify the staff and give them some very intense training. And we're not just talking about the teachers, but also the administrators, because this is kind of a large program and they need to understand it. And there are DLI institutes and trainings and things like that. And then my suggestion would be to implement this at one school at the end of in 18-19. Because, and I'll get to some challenges in a minute, I would start with one school, start small, and see just kind of what sort of hurdles we're going to anticipate. Here are other dual language programs in Georgia, and as you can see, there is an extensive list throughout the state. And where it says K, that means that this year they started in kindergarten at that school, and it's just a strand within that school. Okay, this would be kind of a suggested 5-year plan to answer your question. Dual language immersion is not appropriate for every school, because you have to have heritage speakers at that school of that language. And they have to be a population that is stable, because it's a cohort. And they have to be in the cohort all the way through 6th grade. So
those kids will stay together essentially
they will.
in the same classes.
Yeah, they'll be in those 2 classes, just kind of weaving in and out. So you want to make sure that you have a stable heritage population. You want to make sure you have very supportive administration, and you want to make sure that you have the teachers able to do that. The other thing I think that we're probably going to run into is that parents are going to want a more widespread opportunity for world languages. That's one thing I found very quickly.
How do you pick the 40? That's just...
Yeah, correct. So one of the things that we might want to look at is possibly doing something like what Hall County has done. And I spent a lot of time on the phone with Carrie Woodcock, who is the World Languages Coordinator in Hall County, and they have the World Languages Academy. And that is an entire school of choice that parents have where they can choose to enroll their students there. It's K-8, and she is more than happy to give all of you a tour if you'd like to come see it and see all the wonderful things they do there.
How many students do they have?
I want to say probably about 800, if you look at the cohort.
And do they have kids wanting to get in that can't?
She has an ongoing waiting list.
She does.
And is it open to on-level and
Yes.
gifted? And
They have she said they have special ed, gen ed, gifted, everything that you would offer at a normal school is offered there.
That would be popular.
Obviously, this would not be without challenges. The language choice. My first choice would obviously be Spanish, I think, because we have the heritage speakers for that, but that, again, is something that we'd want to get community input on. Teacher recruitment, forming relationships as this rolls out, assuring that we can staff it appropriately. My suggestion would be to get student teachers from those schools and have them be the student teachers in the DLI classrooms the year that they're student teaching, so that way they're already trained for the following year. Students not being able to participate in dual language immersion, I think, is going to be one of the challenges. And then attrition concerns, just because this is a commitment for K-12. So if you were to do something like choice, that parent has to be aware of the fact that it's a K-12 commitment, not just a K-6 commitment or a K-5 commitment. And then stability, it is. Access to stable community of heritage speakers.
I don't see it working.
I will say, there are some great things already that we have in place. So we have several schools that have stable heritage populations. We do have current staff members. We have, I think, a plethora of community support. The DOE is supportive. They have specialists there to assist us. We do have several universities in the area that are probably going to have a DLI endorsement. And then we do have the existing IB program at South Forsyth High School. Okay, so the learner profile. Again, the goal of Forsyth County is to engage and contribute, and we have all of these, these different traits. I was a student who started world languages in 8th grade, and I studied 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, went to college, and did my freshman, sophomore year, and that was the first time I got to go into an immersion. And I went to Mexico, and I got there, and I had no idea what they were saying, because I hadn't been anywhere where I got to speak fully and be immersed. And it took me a couple of months before I was able to understand the actual language and the culture. So I think that the only true way to learn and to fulfill the learner profile is really to have this immersion experience. Just having done this myself, it is very difficult unless you're immersed in it and you're constantly speaking it. And 50 minutes a day is very difficult to learn a world language. So I just wanted to say again, immersion for me was really what made me fluid and bilingual.
And back to your earlier point, I mean, all the research shows that language acquisition, if you start at an earlier age, is much, I don't want to use the word easier, but it is easier than when you start later in life, just because of the ability of children to learn. And so that why it just makes perfect sense that we would want to start in kindergarten and
How
build
do
our way
they
up.
do this like in Europe? I mean, everybody knows how to speak English, but is that an immersion or is it people just do it?
They teach, if you look at a lot of the schools, they teach the content in the target language, which is what like dual language immersion is. They're teaching the content standards in that language.
Okay, the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the logistics of our county. It's just an evolving place because we're always growing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to pick 40 students out of 46,000.
Well, and you come into kindergarten,
How do you get that commitment?
For 12
Yeah,
years, I don't
right.
know how you could ever.
How could you have all the course offerings that you'd need at that high school level for a diverse group of kids?
I think you would just do the IB, and that's, again, there are so many counties that are so far ahead of us that I think we can learn from them. And for example, like Hall County, when they get to high school, they have some courses that they've developed for that purpose, for those kids to have that access to higher language. They leave 8th grade having completed level 4.
Oh, could they not do dual colleges?
Well, and that's a whole other thing they could. That could be a possibility, would be dual enrollment.
So when you speak of schools, and I'm thinking in terms of Chastity or Cumming, those that have a heavier Spanish population would be the ones that you would look at versus some that are midway maybe?
Yeah, there are quite a few I think that we could look at that have the heritage speakers necessary, and then the stable population. I would say we have 5 or 6.
Right.
Mhm.
It's nice to have all that data, that you've done all that background to get us
yeah.
to this point. It's been that unknown that we just haven't had.
I was glad to do it. Do you have any other questions for me?
Well, obviously not asking you to make a decision this afternoon, I want you to
No.
think about it. But if we are going to pursue the goal, if indeed we want to have to move in this direction of a dual immersion program and start it in the 2018-19 school year, we are going to have to decide pretty soon because there's a lot of work to do between now and then in order to make it happen. So, just think about it. We obviously, as you know, Jamie's going to be leaving us, and we're looking to hire her replacement, and whoever we hire in that will now take the baton from Jamie and continue to research this and take it to wherever you guys decide we want to go.
There's just so many logistical things that I just would have to feel more comfortable with.
And I think that what we could do, even if you wanted to come up with a list of questions, I'm happy to answer those and speak to other districts, go visit the other programs, because they have dealt with all these logistics that you're thinking of.
Well, it
Probably a lot of
would be
it's
good.
online too. If you just gave us, examples, check out these 5. And
Absolutely.
I'm sure they have enough online that probably answers some of our basic questions.
I think
Or to
so.
go to Gainesville, I think would be a good idea to see how they've done their academy.
You could do that, and then, you could travel to APS and
I
see
was gonna
theirs.
say go
Margaret would be
there.
happy to host you. I think until you experience it, it's hard to conceptualize. But again, we've sat in meetings with DOE and we've talked about all these different logistical things, and every district has a different way of approaching it that's right for their district, but it's not insurmountable.
Jamie, do you know that school in Hall County, when they started, did they start just with kindergarten students? Or
They did not. So what they did was, after first grade, you just can't start immersion.
Right.
So they did K1 immersion, and then they did 2 through 5 world languages. And then that immersion rolled up with those kids, and they phased out the world languages.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, just because you can't start in 2nd grade with immersion and start teaching a kid, math in another language and have them understand it. So, it started K1 immersion.
Obviously, if we went that route, we're probably looking at probably 4 or 5 years down the road, because we would have to, in our next bond, building another school and probably repurpose an existing school to be that language academy. So that would probably be further down the road. But, I mean, it's certainly an option, because you would have them all housed in one, you'd have more students, and be all one building, instead of it being a program within a school.
And then they also go to their base high school, and their base high school is equipped to handle their language needs. So they leave 8th grade with level 4, and then they do like 5, 6, and then like AP language, and then AP literature.
And what I see, I think that when we started doing foreign language a long time ago, it was that everybody felt, and we all know that it's important that people be able to speak 2 languages. But I think the feeling in this county is that they want every student graduating from here to be able to speak 2 languages. And we're talking of a program where you have to have heritage students versus natives, whatever, to integrate. And we really, that's not the majority of the dynamics in our county. And I'm not saying that we should not address this, and I'm not saying that it's not something we should look at, but I think the perception of what parents want in this county is that every child have access and be able to speak 2 language, which, as you said from your presentation, is not a logical.
I don't think it's a realistic expectation.
I don't think parents understand that
Right.
even many, many years of language like you had, you still went to Mexico and couldn't understand them. I don't think they understand that.
And that was, when I was in the classroom, I was fine, because I had learned academic language. Yes, but when I went in the streets, that social language, I honestly had no, I mean, it took me months to be able to understand, and they were speaking at native, speed, so. And that's why, like Hall County, they've done dual language immersion strands within 3 schools, which were appropriate, because they had the heritage speakers, and then they did the academy to address the fact that so many other students wanted this opportunity.
That were not heritage-speaking students.
And that weren't districted for those schools.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make sense?
But they were still heritage-speaking students?
At the academy, those tend to be English speakers.
Right, okay.
And it's more than one language at the academy.
They do, they have Spanish and Chinese.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And they do most of it in Spanish, and then they have an hour of Chinese instruction.
I think it's amazing we're actually here. I mean, thinking back in the days when we started just experiential type of language learning, and we realized that wasn't the way to go, that it wasn't giving us nothing. We got a lot of pushback taking it out because we knew it was right, but we know that we need this type program to move to the next step. So now it's for us to figure that out and have that vision and talk all the way down to having an academy and understand where we're
It was
going
right
with
to
it.
take it out, though, because Carlin was started at the beginning and went through all the years, and she, it was the same thing every year. It's just not enough.
It isn't. And I remember my kids would get to me in level 1, and we'd do that first unit, which is like days of the week, and they could all sing the song. And
That
you know,
was her, right?
yeah, that was Carlin. But then once we got to anything really beyond that, they were equal. So
It's interesting.
Food for thought.
thank you.
Thank you so much for all your research.
And I made it clear to Jamie, if things don't work out in Denver, she's welcome to come back.
I appreciate that.
When are you going?
My last day is the 31st, and we move the 2nd. So I have 1 day.
Good luck.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Darla.
Thanks, Jamie.
Okay, next we have the Georgia milestone results with Carl Mercer, and he's smiling.
Yes, I'm sure you guys have looked through the results as well. So it's a pleasure to be here this evening and to present some of the overall results from the Milestones 2016. 15-16, so we're going to look at EOGs and EOCs, end of grade and end of course assessments. And just as a reminder, we have our 4 achievement levels. Starts with beginning learners, then developing learners, proficient, and then distinguished as well. So let's start with EOG. As you can see, we've got a comparison. The light blue is Forsyth County and the dark blue is Georgia. Just a comparison of the percent of students that fell at the developing and higher. So that's in those top 3 areas, developing, proficient, and distinguished. So you can see that there's some pretty notable areas. ELA grade 3, grade 4 ELA, and then grade 4 science and grade 4 social studies, where we're really maximizing, we're seeing some distance between the percent that we have and the percent that the state has. As we move to the proficient and higher, and again, going from developing to proficient, and then we'll go to distinguished, we start to see the separation. So we see the separation of the kids that are just in developing and higher to the kids that are at that proficient and higher in the top 2 levels. So you can see that, again, as we look at some of these areas, grade 3 math, grade 4 math, grade 5 math, we've got some areas that are 25 to 30% more that are in those areas as well. And we see that across the board. We go to the distinguished for grades 3 through 5, and we see that there's some remarkable differences between the percent of students that Forsyth County has in that top level, distinguished, and the percent that the state has. In fact, if you look at the percentages, it's really opposite. The low level that we have in beginning is almost equivalent to the low level that the state has at the distinguished levels. And again, we see kind of the same scenario here. Grade 3 math, grade 4 math, grade 5 math are some of the highest areas where we see the most separation. And then we look at the mean scale score. Some of these, you look at grade 4 math, we've got a difference of about 50 points, and grade 5 math just under 50 points, and that's the average scale score on those assessments. So we move on to grades 6 through 8, looking at the 4 subject areas. And just a note, you'll see that grade 8 science, we've got a footnote down there that those results include a combination of the science EOG and the physical science EOC. You know, in 8th grade, our students take the physical science. A large portion of them take a physical science. And so the state this year has combined those so that we can see that connection between the kids that are taking it at our level and also the kids that are taking physical science in 8th grade at the state level. And then also in math, you know, we've got a portion of kids that take Algebra 1, and they've combined those results as well. But you can see we've got a nice separation where, you know, almost all the areas are at 90% or above in the top 3 areas. We move to proficient and higher, and we look and we see that, again, we've got separation. We've got some areas where we're 25 to 30 points, percentage points above as far as the number of students in those top 3. And then we go to distinguish, and some, you know, obviously some areas that really stand out, grade 7 math and grade 8 math as well. We see that really stand out as far as the percentage of students that are in that top performance level. And then mean scale score as well. We see the difference between the state and Forsyth County. Note that there for that grade 8 science, since our students take a combination of physical science and 8th grade science, there's different scale scores for that. So we can't look at an average mean, so it's really not comparable there. Just to look overall, we see that this graph kind of gives you an idea of the percentage now that we have our second year of assessments. We can look at and see not only comparing us to the state, but now let's compare us to how we're doing and what our progress and trend over time is. And you can see that for math, ELA, and science, we've increased by 1%. And even though 1% seems not much, but when you talk about when we have upper 80s to 90% of our kids in those top areas, there's less room to close that gap every single time. But you'll see that in the percent of proficient and the percent of distinguished that we're moving those kids from that top 3 to the top 2 and to the top 1. So we continue to move those kids along the way, really pushing them and up in the rigor. ELA is the only area where we did experience a little bit of a reduction when it comes to the percent of distinguished students, but you can see that the overall percentage in that area has increased. And just to mention Lexile scores as well, you've got an average 2015 and 2016 Lexile score, and we can see in every grade, With the exception of grade 7, there was an increase. Some were pretty notable, 4th grade and 8th grade, number of the increase in that average Lexile. 7th grade is something that, obviously, that's something that we're going to look at, and that we are already looking at that, and how we can improve Lexile measures through ELA. You can also see one thing that we like to look at a lot is growth, and just looking at the same cohort. So if you look at grade 3 from 2015, and then you look at grade 4 for 2016, you can see that those students are going from 787 average Lexile to 954. And in every area, the case is that there's an increase. So that's a big area that we want to look at, because now you're looking at the same kids, much like student growth percentiles. So I always like to do a couple system reflections overall. So we had some GLOWs and GROWs. GLOWs being all subject areas, overall percent of students scoring developing and higher and proficient and higher increased. Math, science, and social studies, there was an increase in the percent of students scoring at distinguished. Lexile, average scores increased in grades 3 through 6 and 8. And then the percent of students scoring distinguished was within the top 2 in the state for ELA, all grades, math, all grades, social studies, grades 4 through 7, and then science for grades 5 and 7. Some areas that we're looking at for GROWs, we did have that reduction that we noticed in the score of distinguished. And in science, we are seeing an increase, but we need to continue to push those kids, not just from beginning developing, but also to proficient and distinguished. So we'll move on to end of course assessments. And you'll see, much like with EOGs, we've got that separation as we look at all the different assessments. You will notice, if you look at state results, that maybe in geometry and economics, they may have some different percentages, because they just look at spring. But we have, in both of those 2 subject areas, we have a portion of our students that test in December. So when I present results, I always include these full school year of results, so we get a full idea of the magnitude of what we're doing. Proficient and higher, again, you start to see that separation. And then in distinguished, and you'll see that geometry and economics tend to be are 2 of the areas of highlights for us, and you're going to see here when we show a comparison from last year to this year. And then looking at mean scale score, again, you can see kind of geometry and biology and economics are some of the biggest, where we've got the best, the highest mean scores. So this table right here shows you the difference between 2015, 2016 scores when we look at the percent developing in the top 3, percent proficient, percent distinguished. And you can see that in almost every area except for the Algebra 1, we had a small reduction in the percent of developing for Algebra 1, but we had an increase of those students in proficient, and then an increase in distinguished. And American Lit, geometry, and economics, those are pretty awesome increases from one year to the next. Now, there are a lot of factors that went into it. This is our 2nd year of this assessment system, so you always see a little bit of a dip in that first year. And also, the assessments in 2015 we knew were waived, and so that students tend to be efficient with their time, and so that may have played a factor in it, but you can see that we've had a tremendous increase from last year to this year. Very impressed, very proud of those scores and what they've done in our schools. And Lexile, those increases for American Lit, 87 points, and then 9th grade Lit, 38. 87, that's more than the 3 years before it combined, that increase. So you can tell that there's really a focus on English and reading and those Lexile levels, and you hear those conversations a lot as you're in the schools. And again, if you look at 9th grade Lit 2015 of 1333, and then when those kids take American Lit, and you see that there is an increase as well, because we want to look at grade level from one grade level to the next. Just some reflections, again, all subjects, we're moving students to proficient and distinguished at high rates. 9th grade lit, American lit, geometry, biology, physical science, U.S. history, and economics, growth in the percent of students scoring developing and higher. American lit, geometry, and economics, strong increases in the percent of students scoring proficient and distinguished. Lexile, impressive increases in average scores across the district. And then district performance in the top 5 for the state for the percent of students scoring at distinguished in 9th grade lit, American lit, Algebra 1, geometry, biology, physical science, and economics. Grows. We had a little slight reduction in Algebra 1, those students at the developing and higher, but again, those kids that were developing higher were pushing more to proficient and distinguished. And then physical science, we did see increases, obviously, but just to continue to push those students to continue to increase. And, you know, one thing that I also, going back to this increase, I think, Ms. Crow, you asked a question last year about the decision to go with the discrete versus integrated. I think this right here shows you that that's the right decision. Our students are at you know, increased levels. They're doing well. They're outperforming. They're increasing from last year to this year. So a lot of increases in student achievement. How are we using the data? So we don't just collect the data and present it. You know, we're obviously always looking at the data and using it to guide our instruction. We disaggregate that data for the schools. As soon as we get it, we put it out so they can start looking and making needed changes to instruction. We had a district needs assessment led by Amy Reuter, and I pulled a bunch of data in together, and we had some of the district leaders looking at that, making decisions based on what that means for us in the direction that we need to go. We always in T&L, teaching and learning, we're looking at that data, we're analyzing it, we're having conversations. We had a department meeting yesterday where we're talking about achievement level descriptors, which are specific information about where those students are and how to move them to the next level. The district leadership teams that we've had them in ELA and in math, and I think you can see that you know, those are working, and we're continuing. They're taking those, they're taking our results, they're talking to those leaders, which are made through, you know, of teachers throughout the district, and they're having conversations about what we need to do to move forward. And you know, our whole focus on assessment literacy and what we want to do with that, from K through 3 with our Fontes and Pinnell, and the focus that we have on reading and ELA, and I think that, you know, all of these things, and you know, you think back to our presentation that Dr. Lowe did with our graduation rate for CTAE, you know, having that personalized connection through that content, I think that has a huge impact on students as well. Just wanted to kind of end with, I wanted to make that connection to the learner profile, and so I highlighted some of the areas that I felt like what we're doing and the improvements that we're seeing in student achievement are hitting, and that's master and apply academics for college and career success, display integrity and perseverance and drive to achieve personal goals, because we're looking at personalized learning. We're working with that. Kids are setting goals. Critical thinking, applying their knowledge, connecting to be a world-wise person, and then communicating responsibly with, you know, we're looking at those Lexile scores. Obviously, all of this data is for your review. We've got our data dashboard, we have data profiles, and then obviously this board presentation. We also have the Georgia DOE has a list of all the schools, and you can look at statewide information. Hopefully I've done a good job of pulling this all together for you, so you don't have to fish through all those Excel spreadsheets. You leave that piece to me. But any questions or?
I have to. I get a chuckle because math is not my thing at all, but the complaints you hear about math and what the kids are learning, how they're learning now versus how we learned and parents can help. But obviously something is working, because the scores are just continually improving every year. So we may not understand it, but it works.
I've got a 5th and 7th grader, so every night we're looking at, and you know, it's challenging. You know, it's because it is different. It's a different way of thinking for me. It's not really a different way of thinking for them, but it makes sense. They're taking it back to abstract knowledge and concept theory, so which is good.
The foundation is being laid, and that's what's important. But it's kind of funny. It's great.
Anybody
All right,
else?
thank
More
you.
questions?
No, that was a lot. I can't believe you got that all in a many PowerPoints.
Oh.
I love it.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm glad somebody does.
Have a great evening.
Numbers, but boy,
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, Carl.
that's a lot.
I know.
Nancy and I might be
Do we have
cross-eyed
any
even after
future-
that. Okay.
Do we have any future agenda items that anybody needs to add for discussion or?
I'll talk to you later.
Okay, and then action items, we have Carl Mercer again with the Strategic Waivers School System. Your second, Bill. Look, he wasn't
Sorry about that.
Student,
That I was coming up right
He
away.
was so excited about his data that he forgot he was next to.
Okay. All right, so we, obviously, strategic waivers contract through the law, we're allowed to update and amend when we see that we have the need to fit. One of the, there are a couple things on the horizon that we're thinking about as far as making sure that we're up to date in our contract and make sure that we have still continue to have the flexibility as we move forward. One is Alliance Academy for Innovation, ensuring that we have the flexibility to hire industry experts in order to come in and to teach and to mold these students. We also need to make sure that we have a salary schedule that we're able to meet with those out-of-the-box types of certification situations. We have the Every Student Succeeds Act, and right now we know that the state is going through a lot of change with that, and just to ensure that we're able to kind of stay ahead of some of those flexibilities, we wanted to make sure that we had those in there as well. We've got the Governor's Education Reform Commission, and so there's some things, flexibility that we've asked that commission may touch on, just to make sure that we can continue to do business in what is best for kids. And then also the Forsyth Virtual Academy, we've got some flexibilities in there when we're talking about online learning and having a consistent curriculum. Well, what is in human resources? We have some official code that we wanted to update, and the ideas behind it is we wanted to pursue a salary schedule that attracts and retains highly qualified workforce. Allocate state funds for personnel based on school and district needs, select and develop qualified applicants without limitation based on certification requirements, allow for a streamlined and fair process for due process and appeals, utilize staff as needed to meet the needs of students. For online learning, our focus is to increase the consistency and academic experience of the students. We have some students that may be taking Georgia Virtual School. We don't have control over that curriculum and the rigor level of that curriculum, yet that student comes back to us. We assign the credit, and the accountability of the EOC or the assessment that comes along with it is with us. And so some of these flexibilities are to ensure that we can control that a little bit more than we have in the past. The timeline with these added flexibilities. Obviously, we've got the presentation tonight. After this presentation, we've got a board resolution and a letter of intent that we'll send to the state. In September, we'll draft, hopefully around September, in collaboration with the Department of Education, we'll draft a contract amendment. In October, we'll present that final strategic waivers contract to this board for approval. And then hopefully in November, December, the DOE will present that final contract for approval to the State Board of Education. And again, just bringing it back to the learner profile, there's some attributes that deal with workforce development, connecting academics and career, and so we see that connection between the learner profile and these flexibilities are going to allow us to pursue that and to adhere and to use that learner profile for the benefit of what's best for kids. You have any questions? I know you probably have the board resolution and letter of intent up in front of you.
We do, yep. Any questions for Carl for
I just want to
recommendation?
commend you for, and Jamie too for tying it to the learner profile. It was like we used to do years ago.
Exactly.
But to have it out here in front, it just makes it more relevant to what we do as a board and
Mhm.
what everybody is focused on is this.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
Great.
align everything to the learner profile.
Exactly.
We're seeing
That
that,
message has
right?
come
But
through.
but to
Yeah,
see it,
obviously.
That's right.
but to see
Right.
it is powerful.
Exactly.
With that, I'd recommend approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the Strategic Waivers School System Contract Amendment Proposal?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Kristin and a second by Nancy. Any more discussion, questions? All in favor?
I think we're all excited.
Okay, unanimous. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks so
Carl.
much.
Okay, and the next action item is the Alliance Academy State Capital Outlay Application with Mr. Bill McKnight.
In order for us to apply for state funding for the Alliance Academy, we need to submit a capital outlay application to the Georgia Department of Education. We'll be submitting an application for $13,972,824. We've attached a copy of the application on e-board. Do any of y'all have any questions or anything about it?
Already had some questions, had them answered, so very interesting.
Okay.
For some of us.
Well, if you don't have any questions,
It's interesting to read.
do you want to ask for approval or do you want me?
I recommend approval.
Do I have a motion to approve the state capital outlay application for the
So moved.
Alliance Academy? A motion by Nancy
Second.
and a second by Kristin. Any more discussion, questions, comments?
It's exciting.
Okay, all in favor?
Mhm.
Unanimous?